Let's pick up where we left off yesterday with the idea of Herod being the new king of the Jews. He was designated as that by the Roman Senate in the early part of 40 BC because they felt that he would be much more needed in a leadership role than his younger brother-in-law, Aristobulus III, who was in line to become like the high priest and ethnarch of the Jews at that point. So Herod comes to Jerusalem and gives them a chance to surrender control to him. They don't because Antigonus, the usurper, refuses to do so. And so it takes Herod a few years, but he finally brings Jerusalem under siege, breaks into it, and takes control of it in 37 BC. And Antigonus, the troublemaker, is sent off to Syria, where he's executed as an enemy of both the Jewish people and the Roman peoples. And then Herod settles down into this role as the new political leader of the Jewish kingdom, the old Asmonean kingdom. He finally, at the prompting of his mother-in-law and at his own choice to protect his young brother-in-law from Mark Antony, he finally declares Aristobulus III to be the new high priest of the Jews. And then Feast of Tabernacles rolls around. That's in the late summer of 37. And this 17-year-old, almost 18 years old probably by this time, very handsome man, puts on the special uniform of the high priest, and he goes up in front of the festival crowd and goes through all the ceremonies that are involved in the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is the harvest festival of the Jewish people. It's very high-spirited, lots of singing and dancing and eating and celebrating. And so it's a really great time, and they particularly respond enthusiastically to Aristobulus III. And this apparently starts making Herod jealous. That's what Josephus and others pretty much indicate. And then this is what happens next. Some point shortly after the festival, Aristobulus was, quote, accidentally, end quote, drowned during some swimming pool horseplay with Herod's servants at the palace in Jericho. I think it would be very hard to be dogmatic as to whether or not it was accidental or it was done on purpose. But the reaction to it is immediate. Alexandra, that's mom or mother-in-law to Herod, immediately and publicly blamed Herod for Aristobulus' death. She immediately petitions Cleopatra to convince Mark Antony to bring Herod up on charges related to the death of Aristobulus. Because we know that Alexandra and Cleopatra are very good friends, and Cleopatra has an awful lot of sway over Mark Antony at this point. So Mark Antony agrees that it should be looked into. So probably in the following year, that is probably the very early part of 36 BC, Herod is told that he needs to come to Syria and explain the situation of Aristobulus' death before Mark Antony in an official hearing. So before he leaves, Herod makes arrangements with his sister's husband, a man by the name of Joseph, who's going to take care of things in his absence from Jerusalem. He makes arrangements with this Joseph that if Mark Antony condemns him and executes him, that Joseph is to kill Miriamne, because as Herod describes it, he can't stand the idea of Miriamne becoming another man's lover, and particularly of Mark Antony. And so I know this is very twisted, and it's another thing that gives us an into the mindset of Herod. He does not think straight in matters of relationship. So he has this mindset, if I can't have her, no one gets to have her. Well, it turns out, according to Josephus, that this Joseph shared that information with Miriamne in an attempt to prove to her that Herod loved her in a ridiculous fashion, with so much that it made him crazy. So Herod ends up being cleared of the charges that he wasn't responsible for having Aristobulus killed. And so he comes back to Jerusalem, back to Judea, where shortly after, he and Miriamne get into a great big fight regarding a rumor that she had been sleeping with Joseph, that is, Herod's brother-in-law. It was a lie that had been suggested to him by his wife, Herod's sister, Salome, and also by someone that really doesn't like Miriamne, by the way. Now, in trying to patch things up, Miriamne makes reference to Herod's love being so strong for her, and that it was proved by his desire that she wouldn't ever be married to anyone else, because she knew that about the order that had been given to Joseph. Well, that just blew everything out of proportion again, because Herod assumes the only way that she could have known that is through pillow talk between him and between her and Joseph. And so he immediately orders Joseph, his brother-in-law, to be executed. Now, he wanted to kind of do the same thing to Miriamne, but he couldn't. He just can't bring himself to end his relationship with her that way. However, he does have his mother-in-law arrested and detained at this time because, as you might suspect, she continues to have this bad attitude toward him, even though he'd been cleared of the charges by Mark Antony regarding the death of her son. So let's move forward another year or so, somewhere probably around 35 BC. Cleopatra has continually urged Mark Antony to give Judea and Arabia into her control, to remove Herod and his Arabian counterpart from power and just let her have that property. And so he eventually agrees to give portions of them to her, and this results in Herod having to rent some parts of his own kingdom from Cleopatra. Then Cleopatra comes to Judea for a visit. And on that visit, supposedly, she keeps trying to sleep with Herod. And the suggestion has been made that she seems to use sexual activity as a control process. That's what a lot of people thought she'd been doing with Mark Antony, and now the suggestion is made that she was trying to do it with Herod. And Josephus reports that Herod deflected all of her advances, and then begins plotting her assassination for the greater good of everyone in the Middle East, himself and Mark Antony included. And that does seem to track with things that he says later. He believes she is a grave danger to the Roman Republic and Jewish interests in the Eastern Mediterranean basin. And so the only reason he doesn't actually carry out the assassination plot is because he's worried about what might follow for him if it were to be found out that he was the one that had her killed. Now, let's understand that in December of 33 BC, a second triumvirate was entered into. This is a power-sharing arrangement that included Octavian and Mark Antony. All of that had started back in 43, and now in 33, it's scheduled to end. So Octavian begins portraying Mark Antony as a betrayer of his wife, who is Octavian's full sister. We've got a lot of intermarriage relationship problems here. And that's not surprising because we're pretty sure that he was playing around with Cleopatra off in Egypt. But it's not just that. It's not just a personal thing that he's cheating on my sister. He also starts claiming that he is a defier of the Senate. That is, he doesn't do what the Senate tells him to do. And that basically he is a Roman that has gone native. That is, he's just been doing whatever Cleopatra and the other people of power in Egypt want him to do. And so that's what prompts then, in the beginning of 32 BC, the Roman Senate declaring war on Queen Cleopatra, and by extension upon their own guy, Mark Antony. And so now we've got another Roman civil war. And guess what? The Jewish kingdom is sucked into it again. And unfortunately for Herod, they are sucked in on the wrong side of it, the side that will eventually lose. In 31, Mark Antony was preparing to take on Octavian in order for them to decide which of the two of them was going to be the dictator or the main leader of the Roman Republic. And at the prompting of Cleopatra, Mark Antony assigns Herod with the task of subduing the Arabians rather than directly assisting him against Octavian. So instead of taking Herod off to war with him, he sends Herod off against the flank position of the Eastern Roman Republic, that is, against the Arabians. Cleopatra thought that this would be to her benefit to keep the Judeans and the Arabians kind of at each other's throats during all of this, because apparently her idea was, whichever side loses, I'll be able to pick up the other side into my kingdom and pick up the scraps from the losing side as well. Well, Herod was eventually the winner in that Jew versus Arab war. But in the later part of 31 BC, the civil war pretty much comes to a conclusion. On the 2nd of September in 31 BC, Mark Antony lost the Battle of Actium, which was a naval battle that took place off the coast of Greece. This was a turning point in Octavian's life and his power base And so many of the ancient historians use the 2nd of September 31 BC as an anchor point in history. And so Mark Antony and his dwindling forces retreat back to Egypt, where they kind of barricade themselves for what they anticipate will be the assault by Octavian upon Egypt proper. Now, back in Judea during all of this, Alexandra, the mother-in-law of Herod, has assumed that the defeat of Mark Antony spells the soon removal of Herod from the Jewish throne, which was probably not a bad assumption. But she does this by pestering her father, Hyrcanus, who is now 80 years old. Remember, he's the former high priest and ethnarch of the Jews. She petitions her father, Hyrcanus, or pesters her father, Hyrcanus, into petitioning the Arabians for temporary sanctuary, because she believed that once Octavian arrived in the region, Herod would be gone, and then their family would remain as the only legitimate rulers to claim the Jewish throne. And then he could come back and be the ethnarch of the Jews. Well, the Arabs agreed to this, but the courier carrying all of these letters decided that Herod needed to know about it and turned them over to him. And he subsequently brought Hyrcanus before the Sanhedrin on charges of treason. And since he had the evidence of the letters, Hyrcanus was convicted of being involved in a plot to usurp Herod's position, and so he is executed. And it is clear from the writing of Josephus that he pitied how Hyrcanus ended up dead. This is the quote from Antiquities, Book 15, Chapter 6. His character appeared to be that of a man of a mild and moderate disposition, who suffered the administration of affairs to be generally done by others under him. He was adverse to much meddling with the public, nor had shrewdness enough to govern a kingdom. And both Antipater and Herod came to their greatness by reason of his mildness. And at last he met with such an end from them as was not agreeable either to justice or piety. And so if you go back over the history of Hyrcanus, you know that much of that is very true. He never really wanted to be anybody super important. He kind of liked the idea of being the high priest of the Jews, didn't really want to be the political leader, but he felt that he was kind of forced into it by his friend Antipater the Idumean, the father of Herod the Great. And at every step along the way, he pretty much let Herod's family kind of run the political side of things, and he just took care of the ceremonies of the religious until finally, here at the end, he ends up being pushed by his daughter back into the limelight in such a way that he ends up executed. And so it's a really sad story, Hyrcanus. Okay, so in early 30 BC, fearing a lot of political fallout from the Actium disaster, that is, the loss of Mark Antony, Herod secured his mother and his sister and his very young children by Mariamne inside the Masada fortress, which is about 32 miles southeast of Jerusalem, not far from the shoreline of the Dead Sea. So he's basically got his blood family secured away in the Masada fortress. And he's got his younger brother protecting them there. Then he orders that Miriamne, Princess Miriamne, his wife, the mother of his children, along with her mom, Alexandra, be taken away to the fortress of Alexandrium, which is about 25 miles northeast of Jerusalem. So he's split up the two sides of his family. The non-blood side, he's got up in the north. And he's given secret orders that if anything happens to him in his upcoming meeting with Octavian, that his non-blood relatives, that is, Miriamne and her mom Alexander, are to be instantly executed. And that would leave his blood relatives, his mom, his sister, and his two children by Miriamne alive, and those children would be the only legitimate heirs to the Jewish throne. They basically are still part of this Hasmonean kingdom line. Now, this is how Josephus reports it in Antiquities, Book 15, chapter number 6. When he had given this charge, he made haste to Rhodes, that's the island of Rhodes, off the coast of modern-day Turkey, to meet with Caesar. This is Octavian Caesar, the future Augustus. He's about 10 years younger than Herod. And when he had sailed to that city, he took off his diadem. The diadem of a king was basically a band around the head. Sometimes it was made of gold, but not always. But remitted nothing else of his usual dignity, and when upon his meeting him, he desired that he would let him speak to him. So he meets with the winner of the Civil War, and he takes off his diadem, but tells Octavian, please let me speak to you before you do anything else. Now, continuing. He therein exhibited a much more noble specimen of a great soul, for he did not betake himself to supplications, as men usually do on such occasions, nor offered him any petition as he were an offender, but after an undaunted manner gave an account of what he had done, for he spoke thus to Caesar. And this quote is probably very close to exactly what he said, because there would have been scribes taking notes in whatever passed for shorthand of that day, so that it could be recorded for posterity. So here's the quote. That he had the greatest friendship for Antony and did everything he could that he might attain the government, and that he did not indeed in the army with him, that he was not indeed in the army with him because the Arabians had diverted him, but that he had sent him both money and corn, which is a reference to wheat or barley, which was but too little in comparison of what he ought to have done for him. For if a man owns himself to be another's friend and knows him to be a benefactor, he's obliged to hazard everything, to use every faculty of his soul, every member of his body, and all the wealth he had for him, in which I confess I have been too deficient. So Herod is basically saying, look, I was distracted elsewhere during this fight, but I was supporting Antony because he was my friend, he was my patron, and I should have done more for him because that's what people do for their friends. Back to the text. However, I am conscious to myself that so far I have done right, that I have not deserted him upon his defeat at Actium, nor upon the evident change of his fortune have I transferred my hopes from him to another, but have preserved myself, though not as a valuable fellow soldier, yet certainly as a faithful counselor to Antony, when I demonstrated to him that the only way he had to save himself and not lose all his authority was to slay Cleopatra. For when she was once dead, there would be room for him to retain his authority, and rather to bring you to make a composition with him, that is a treaty, than to continue at enmity any longer. none of which advices would he attend to, but preferred his own rash resolutions before them, which have happened unprofitably for him, but profitably for you. So basically, Herod says, I didn't abandon him after Actium. I've instead been telling him the best thing he could do is kill Cleopatra and patch things up with you. And that's what I have continued to tell him, and he won't listen. Back to the text. Now, therefore, in case you determinest about me and my alacrity in serving Antony, according to your anger at him, I own there is no room for me to deny what I've done. Nor will I be ashamed to own, and that publicly too, that I have a great kindness for him. But if you will put him out of the case and only examine how I behaved myself to my benefactors in general, and what sort of friend I am, that you will find by experience that we shall do and be the same to you. For it is but changing the names and the firmness of friendship that we shall bear to you, and will not be disapproved by you. And so he basically tells Octavian, if you'll just look at the way that I have tried to be a friend to Antony, even in the toughest of times, I promise you, sir, if you'll take me on, I will be that same friend to you. And guess what? His words of the value of such friendship were very persuasive. And Octavian, at that meeting, affirmed Herod as the king of the Jews, and immediately petitioned the Senate to officially confirm him as such, and the two of them remained very close allies for the rest of Herod's life. So this is how Herod ended up being declared the king of the Jews a second time, at the direction of Octavian Caesar, who is going to become Emperor Augustus. And so the intertwining, the combination between the Jews and the Romans continue in our story.